PC Radio.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Joe, it's time to go, go, go. You're just so status quo. Both friend and foe know you're a no-go, Joe.
Come on, man.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich.
But Rich is, he's not here. We've gone over this. We've talked about this week. He's serving our country, and he's training with the Minnesota Army National Guard. That's what he's gone all week in our first week. And, we've been pretty serious this week. We've talked about a lot of police-related stuff, and I will admit that this week has been rather cop-heavy on the show. For that, I will not apologize because I feel that it's relevant. There's going to be a lot of people that are moving to alternative sources of media because nobody trusts the mainstream media any longer, and it's getting more and more difficult to ignore the obvious bias that the mainstream media has. For example, how in the tank they are now for Kamala Harris. Just weeks ago, they had no problems tearing her apart when she was, going head-to-head with Joe Biden, and he was the golden child. He was the one that was being protected because he's the one that everybody wanted to nominate for this DNC, and we knew that he was going to be the Democratic nominee from the beginning. Everybody was wondering, why isn't this guy in the race yet? He didn't need to be. And he still isn't, actually. How long have they been hiding him in the basement? The last thing that they want is for Joe Biden to be in front of cameras or talking or, shaking hands, because if he gets out of the house, there's a pretty high probability that he's going to touch a little girl or smell her hair, caressing her in some weird and inappropriate way. And then furthermore, every time that he opens his mouth without a teleprompter, you remember this? Hey, come on, man. Where is it, man? Come on. He can't think for himself. He's full of talking points. He's a 40-year, or give or take, establishment career politician. The guy's never run a business. He's never done anything in his life other than politics. And, he's claiming that he's all of a sudden going to fix everything. Well, what have you been doing for the last 40 years? And then now it's all about racism. You were the vice president under America's first black president. Why didn't racism get fixed then? Anyway, my name is Stu. This is PC Radio, the patriotically correct radio show. Thanks for joining us on this Friday. It's Casual Friday. It is Freestyle Friday. So what we do on Fridays is, we're just kind of going with the flow here. We open up the studio lines for you to call if you want to. That's 877-45-WARRIOR, 877-45-WARRIOR, 877-45-WARRIOR. You can also email the show. Our email address has been publicized at the website, which is thepcradioshow.com. And you can always email me at stu@thepcradioshow.com. That's STEW, like the stuff you eat. stu@thepcradioshow.com. We're broadcasting live right now. Welcome to all of our Mojo 50 listeners over on the iHeartRadio side of it. And if you're watching us, there's a pretty good chance that you've downloaded the OpsLens app. If you have not downloaded the OpsLens app, make sure that you get over there and do that. OpsLens, OPSLENS, OPSLENS. This segment of the show on Freestyle Friday is brought to you by American Pride Roasters Coffee. If you think I'm kidding, I'm absolutely not. It's what I drink. I drink it because it's bold. I drink it because it is rich. I drink it because it's flavorful, and I drink it because they're paying me to. The network tells me that I need to drink this. So I do it because I want to keep my job. I want to stay on Mojo 50 Radio. I want to have my thing going on iHeart, and we want to grow this thing to be really huge. The reason why we want it to be really huge, not only because it's great for my income, but also because people in their search for these alternative media sources depend on somebody to actually deliver the truth and be relentless seekers of the truth, which is why I had, for example, Brett Kokonatis on on Tuesday. This is a runaway Democrat. He left the Democrat Party after being pushed out, essentially, for not being progressive enough for them. This is a candidate who left the Democratic Party and actually ran in New Mexico as an openly gay guy on the GOP ticket for the 1st congressional district in New Mexico. People are starting to catch on. People not only are moving away from these extremist progressives, and I'm not talking about just Democrats, as I've been very open about on this program. I have Democrats as friends. I have Democrats as family members. I get along with a lot of Democrats, and they are not the enemy of America. The enemy of America, as I have clearly outlined, are extremist progressives with a radical agenda to completely overhaul our country by using the emotion of fear and false narratives to attempt to control you. For example, the coronavirus. Next week, we're going to be talking to some doctors about the coronavirus, and we're going to get into some real facts, some real information. We know the bias of the media because we just had a group of doctors in Washington, D.C. that were on TV talking about the negative side effects of wearing a face mask for prolonged periods of time. They talked about the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine, that it works. It saves lives. Why don't they want you taking this stuff? We're going to get into that with some medical doctors, and we're going to pontificate the political side of that. And I guess what I've always been told, and it's absolutely 100,000% true, if you want to know who's behind something, all you got to do is follow the money. So we're going to create a money trail next week, too, when Richard is back. He's obviously a very good researcher. Intern boy over here, not a good researcher, not really good at anything, as a matter of fact, but he knows how to contact people, and our researchers will start digging into this stuff over the weekend so that we can deliver these hardcore facts with you on Monday, because Fridays are not meant for that. All right, we're getting ready to maybe get the pontoon boat out, depending on where you're at. If you have water around, maybe go swimming, go to the beach. We got our kids around. I am in the basement studio here at the PC radio show facilities, and so it's chilly here. Now, it's 90 degrees outside today and humid. It's like when you walk outside, it reminds me of when I lived in Florida. It's like, you throw a wet towel in the dryer and it gets really hot and moist. Good word, bro. And then when you pull it out and it's still warm, that's how it feels when you go outside today. It's like hit in the face with that half dry, hot, moist towel. It's gross. But anyway, here in the basement at PC Radio headquarters, it's chilly. I'm thinking it's probably 65. And that can feel pretty good at times. Anyway, 1-877-45-WARRIOR. Again, 877-45-WARRIOR is the studio number. And the email, stu at thepcradioshow.com. On the iPhone, I'm looking here at the emails. We got an email today from Ryan R. He says, hey, really love the show. I've been listening to you all week. It's about time somebody has the gonads to actually say how they feel. I heard you talking about Democrats and how they're not the enemy. I think it's cool that you're able to relate to everybody. I heard you also talking about the George Floyd incident and questioning why the tapes had not been released. That's a great question, Ryan R. It cleared a lot of things up. I'm not saying that it exonerated any of the cops that were there. My opinion is that if there were 4 cops there, which there were, and there are 4 cops that are criminally charged, which is ridiculous. Chauvin, obviously we feel like it looks bad. The technique looks bad. The hold looks bad. I wasn't there. I'm not a juror. I don't have the evidence that will be presented in district court for jurors to deliberate and see all of the facts. I haven't heard the arguments from his defense. I haven't seen much of the medical examiner's report. we're going to talk to Joe in the second half of today's show. Joe is a currently working law enforcement officer on the East Coast, and he's going to be here every Friday for Force Matrix Fridays. He's a scholar, man. He's really good at breaking down use of force situations, and I've been friends with him on Facebook for quite a while, and I don't know how he gets so good at doing that and where his experience comes from, but we'll ask him that. He's going to be here in the second half, and he did post part of the medical examiner's autopsy report. I don't know how he got his hands on it. We're going to ask him about that, and we'll get into that with him. But going back to the false narrative of systemic racism in law enforcement, it's just not there. And the election cycle does the weirdest things to us as citizens. We become slaves to the election cycle, and I'm not using the word slave in a figurative sort of way. I really mean it. I mean literally, quite literally, we are enslaved by the propaganda of both sides of the political aisle. And we hear narratives from Republicans, we hear narratives from Democrats, and then now, lately, this narrative from progressives. And they are self-proclaimed communists. They're socialists. They will tell you that they are. They're not trying to hide it by any means. And the party now that has been hijacked, the Democratic Party that's been hijacked by these progressives, has turned into almost a manhood measuring contest, if you will, for who is going to be the most extreme, who's going to go the farthest left. How far can we take this thing? I heard yesterday that Joe Biden is going to introduce or propose legislation that would include, and I don't know how he can propose legislation at this point, but he's going to propose legislation. I guess I'm assuming that this means if he's elected president, that would require every American to wear a mask when leaving the home at all times. So if that's federal legislation, does that mean that feds are going to enforce the mask laws now? And how much truth is there? By the way, I'm going to need some help from you guys, the listener. You can call me up or you can send me an email, stu@thepcradioshow.com. Does anybody know, or do we have any attorneys out there that can tell us, is this true that if you have a medical condition that it would be detrimental to your health if you wore a mask? Are you able to disregard these mask requirements? When you go into the gas station, for example, and you're not wearing a mask, and they say, hey, you got to wear a mask or get out of here. I understand that's a privately owned business, and you have the right to refuse service to anybody, but I believe it's my body, my choice, right? Or is that just, that's just the thing for them? Oh, got it. Oh, okay, so that's not. Okay, so when it's convenient, I got it. Intern boy says in my ear here that I'm not allowed to say my body, my choice, because we're not talking about killing babies. So it's inappropriate, and it's scary for me to even think about being the homicidal maniac that would walk into the corner store without wearing a mask. How selfish of me to feel my body, my choice at that time. But if we're killing a baby, that's no big deal. And then, of course, my body, my choice. As a matter of fact, let's raise a bunch of money in our party to contribute to Planned Parenthood so that we can actually assist in the homicide of thousands of babies, tens and hundreds of thousands of babies every year. Got another email here, and continuing the email from Ryan R. I just want to get back into this. He said, I truly feel for the African American community. After decades of being manipulated by progressives as modern day slaves, not for means of labor, but for votes, finally we're getting out from under that control. They were. It took one foul incident, George Floyd's death. The left saw this not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. I agree with that. I've said that. This is the exact reason the riots are not being stopped and actually being, I think he meant to say perpetuated. They are. They're being forced. They're being allowed. They're being encouraged by your politicians. And he continues, the progressives want their slaves back. And by creating chaos up until the election, they hope to get their patsy elected, which would be Biden, or actually their patsy now is Kamala Harris, because everybody knows that Biden, should he become elected president, is going to be sitting in that chair for very little time. We talked yesterday on the show, if you missed it, a Rasmussen poll where 59% of likely voters believe it unlikely that Biden will finish his first term. 39% of likely Democrats say they believe it highly unlikely that he'll finish his first term, and that Kamala Harris will become the president. So she's actually the patsy now. They've used Joe now to get to this point. And now that they've used him to get to this point, they've talked him into the hijacking of the party even more. He was on stage saying how he was going to go down as the most progressive president in the history of our country. Imagine that. So if you dealt with 8 years of Obama thinking, wow, this is really progressive, this is really socialist. I mean, socialist was the asterisk underneath Obama's name. He's pretty much the one that actually started to talk about making socialism acceptable again, with the shitty Obamacare bronze plan that's putting people so far into debt that they can't. And then the fiscal spending. Listen, I told you I'm not for really one party or for the next. Democrats are not necessarily all bad people, but I tend to lean more conservative. I mean, that's who I am. I like confronting our enemies. I like building up our military. I like limited government. I like individual liberties. I like freedom. I like babies to be born rather than killed. I don't believe that the open market of drugs should just be freely flowing in our streets. I think that people should be arrested for doing crimes. I believe in law and order. I believe in border protection. So in those ways, I'm very conservative, I guess. But I'm libertarian in the sense that I understand that there are good Democrats and that we need them. And that, we don't need to be extremist conservative. I don't think extremism is good in any sense, whether it's extremely progressive or extremely conservative, just because that there's no room for conversation if you're an extremist, because anything that's not extreme is dismissed as no, that's not good enough. And so there's going back to this, there's like this contest of how extreme can we be, and that's where I think things are getting messed up. Ryan continues, the progressives want their slaves back, and by creating chaos up until the election, they hope to get their patsy elected and then move us towards socialism. That's right. These riots were no accident, he says. They're a calculated and disgusting power play by a party that cares not about the American way of life, but power. They will stop at nothing to regain it. I have said multiple times that there is not one piece of legislation that a progressive or a liberal Democrat, for that matter, will introduce that does not include some compliance, some control, and some power. And once they get the power, that power will never sunset. It will always be there. What is this? This is 87745 Warrior on my screen. Is somebody actually... PC Radio, hello?
Stu Peters.
Okay, yeah, yes.
Is this Stu Peters?
It is. It is. I was a little confused because the studio line rang. It's never rang before. It's our first week of the show, but what's up?
Hey, man, I've heard the first 3 shows. I like what you're putting down. As I listen, I'm thinking to myself, this guy, he's like a ray of sunshine in this otherwise dismal landscape of talk radio, and I think you're doing good things, Stu.
Really?
Really?
It's Freestyle Friday, so you can talk about literally anything you want, but I like your choice. Ego strokes are always going to get you put through, and I'd like to think that we're doing a pretty good job here. What's your first name, sir?
My first name's Bruce.
Bruce, I don't believe you for 1 second, by the way, but that's okay. Your anonymity is important to me, and you can be or do, you can be whoever you want, and within reason, do whatever you want on this radio show on Fridays. Obviously, we don't want to do anything that's going to get me fined by the FCC, and I don't want to get kicked off of iHeart or Mojo right away. But so it's Freestyle Friday. People have dilemmas, people have frustrations, people have things that they want to vent about. So, why don't you go ahead and do that so I don't take up all the time just preaching to everybody today on my soapbox of privilege. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, Stu, speaking of dilemmas, I was sitting at my favorite watering hole last night, surveying the landscape, if you will, and I do have a dilemma.
Okay. Well, let's have it. What happened?
Is it ass or is it tits?
Oh, are we allowed, intern boy, to say those words on here? Can we say the T word? We can't. Okay, so we just choose not to, but Bruce is allowed to say that. Okay. So you're having a conundrum trying to choose between whether or not you like one or the other more, or that one is
correct.
Okay, so butts or boobs? Which one is more useful? I've always been a butt guy, personally. I don't know. I believe with the boobies, anything more than a mouthful is just kind of a waste. I don't really know what they do. They do have a purpose for babies, right? So I guess they provide life.
Well, I'm not into that Kim Kardashian giant hind end type of thing.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
That's too much.
They're actually,
but I also don't want, a flat ass. I need I like those little peach shaped ones. You know what I mean?
Oh well, yeah, of course. They're actually out here, Bruce, getting implants now to make their butts bigger. These girls are.
Is that a thing?
It is. They're making them bigger. I don't know, Bruce, what you do for a living or where geographically you're calling from. Are you kind of a country guy or are you more of a city slicker? What do you got going on? Stu
Peters, I'm kind of a more right in the middle, a smaller city guy.
Okay.
I'm not out there.
Are you? So you're not dealing with. You're not looking at these butt implants. Then you're describing yourself smaller city. So are you like in a rural area? Have you?
South Metro, my man.
Okay,
I'm in the South Metro.
South Metro of what city? Are you here in Minnesota or are you out of state?
That's correct. South Metro, man.
Okay. So are you familiar with who? What is her name? Nicki Minaj. Are you familiar with that woman?
Never heard of him.
Okay. So this is what I mean. And if you want to do a little bit of research, you can go check her out too. I would encourage you to have not eaten of recent times or have an unsettled stomach in any ways, because that would probably finish off the job. But I think she's actually kind of the one, along with the Kardashians, that started to make this fat ass thing really popular. And it's always been a thing in the black culture. African Americans, and you can call me a racist if you want, because I'm sure people already do anyways. If I've disagreed with anybody, or if I've ever said something that you don't agree with, I'm sure that I'm a racist anyways. But no, and just call it how it is. It's in rap songs, I can tell you that. They like a fat ass. Well, what's his name said, I like big butts and I cannot lie. This is going back all the way to the, was that in the early 90s, Bruce?
I believe Sir Mix-a-Lot is the fellow you're referring to, and yes, I would say that would be very early 90s.
Yeah, because I remember riding a school bus. My mom would not let me listen to that song. And I remember riding the school bus, and I sat in the back of the bus. And by the way, if you're a parent and you have kids that are having behavioral issues, safe to say they're picking this stuff up on the school bus. It's a very unsupervised platform where kids run wild. But so I remember my buddy had his Walkman, and we were listening to that song. It's a terrible song. The only reason I liked it, obviously, was because I wasn't allowed to listen to it. I'm up against a hard break here and got to talk a little bit more about American Pride Roasters coffee and our good friends over at Johnson Jewelers. So Bruce, you have a dilemma of your own. Is it butts or boobs? My answer is butts, and we'll see what the popular opinion is. If you want to email us and help Bruce out, butts or boot. We'll do a little bit of a poll. How about that? So email stu@thepcradioshow.com, and all you have to say is butt or boob. How's that? We'll help you out.
Thank you, Stu Peters.
Hey, man, thanks a lot for listening to the show, and feel free to call anytime. We got to get to break here real quick because we have a lot to talk about coming up in the second half with Joe. Anonymous Joe. He's a cop working somewhere in the country. We're not going to tell you where, of course, because that would give him up. Stick around. More PC Radio coming up.
We will force votes.
We will not stop.
Any Republican senator is part of a cover-up.
What the f?
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
This is madness!
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich. Back in a minute. Attention, liberal snowflakes. Caught you listening again.
Well, you happen to have caught me in a moment of self-pleasure.
Stewie and Richie. The Patriotically Correct Radio Show is on the Warrior Radio Network.
We're back here live on the Warrior Radio Network. As I was describing to you, this is the first show on the Warrior Radio Network. Broadcasting live on Mojo 50 Radio. We are on iHeartRadio. And also, if you want to see us live and interact with us, you know that the only way to do that is by downloading the OpsLens app. What's going on? My name is Stu. It's the Patriotically Correct Radio Show. Want to thank all of our friends over at Johnson Jewelers for the beautiful work that they did for cleaning up my ring and getting everything all set back up again. Johnson Jewelers in Woodbury, Minnesota. They do fantastic work. But what's great about Johnson Jewelers is that they do custom work. All right. So if you've got something in mind that you want done, it doesn't matter where you are in the country. Just a few emails and some phone calls, some pictures, exchanging ideas, talking back and forth, and Karen over there and her awesome qualified staff of personal custom jewelers will get you all set up, and they'll get you hooked up. Johnson Jewelers, Woodbury, Minnesota. You can look them up, and you know how you do that? The information superhighway is right at your fingertips. You've got these little phones, which brings me to my next point. We're on social media all the time, whether you're being censored or fact-checked or doxxed or whatever, and so my guest that I'm going to have on right now, who I alluded to having on, is his name is Joe, and he's a currently working cop in the United States. And it's hard for me to have cops on here because cops don't have a First Amendment right. They're oftentimes told that you can't talk to the media by their chiefs, by their bosses, by their sergeants, administrators. No. We'll handle that. And they have PIOs or public information officers that specifically hold those positions, and then they're the ones that are supposed to be out here talking. But on Facebook, that's a different thing. And about a year and a half ago, I met Joe on Facebook, and I was particularly intrigued because he seems to have a very unique point of view when it comes to police incidents, especially the very prolific ones. We've had several of them here in the Minneapolis area over the last few years between Jamar Clark and Philando Castile, and now with the death of George Floyd. And Joe is always defending what's right. And that doesn't mean that he's always defending cops. As a matter of fact, he can be the harshest on other cops, which is when it's due, it's due. He just tells truth and it's unfiltered, which is why he's on this show and which is why we appreciate him. Joe, thanks for coming on.
Stu, I'm glad to be here.
I thought I lost you there for a minute.
In fact.
So I don't want to say that you're harsh by any means, because you're not. I don't want to say that you're aggressive, because you're not. You just, when people are so used to being filtered and censored and living in this politically correct culture of watch your tongue so you're afraid not to offend anybody, it's very refreshing to me that somebody doesn't give a shit and they just say the facts for what they are. And that's, I think, what you do.
Well, I don't ever intend to sound harsh, but with my dialect, my accent, I think I do, even when I don't mean to. So it's one of those things, but if it helps get the point across, that's no problem too.
Our attorney general in Minnesota was recently talking about guns. And, Keith Ellison, he hates the police, first of all. So let me just preface this by saying Keith Ellison, formerly Keith Hakeem, he has a checkered past, extremist Muslim, allegations of spousal abuse, things like that, somehow still gets elected the top cop in the land of the People's Republic of Minnesota. He sits in the Attorney General's office, and he was opining using his privileged platform of media exposure and control just recently here, and was on the news in front of the cameras saying, you have a domestic dispute, you send a guy with a gun. You have a homeless complaint, you send a guy with a gun. You have a disorderly intoxication, you send a guy with a gun. Why are we sending a guy with a gun to every call? Joe, to Keith Ellison, you say what?
Well, first off, let's just discuss Keith Ellison. We know his past, as an alleged domestic abuser. Okay, he has a very checkered past, so he has a reason not to like the police. The impression I get from reading stuff about Keith Ellison and watching interviews with him, his barely literate interviews, is that there is no such thing as criminals with Keith. There are only cops. That's the only problem that he sees in the world. But police have guns. It's just how it's been for probably 150 years, unless you want to get to certain college campuses and stuff like that. But even they have guns now. But the police have guns. They're supposed to have guns. They have guns for a reason. They are legally authorized to use deadly force in situations where it becomes necessary.
Yeah.
So going to a domestic, which can turn from a shouting match into a life and death struggle within the blink of an eye, is why the police have guns. Not just for themselves, but perhaps for the victim in the domestic. It's what the public needs to understand, and too many police chiefs have failed to communicate this over the years. They've just failed to communicate this because they want to push the de-escalation narrative, okay, which is not part of a police officer's job. A police officer is not legally required to de-escalate with anybody, especially with somebody who has no intention of complying. Right? The police are trained and conditioned, and it's been this way for 150 years, as far as American policing has gone. They're conditioned and trained and authorized to achieve peace through violence when it becomes necessary.
Yeah,
we are one
meeting
step away
violence
from
with
using deadly force.
meeting violence with superior violence, right?
Correct. It's, for lack of a better term, it's called the violence of action. I believe that's a military term, but it's been applied to law enforcement as well. They give the police guns for a reason. Okay. No police officer walks into that situation wanting to use that gun.
Right.
But when it becomes necessary, that's why they have them. Because other people are not trained or conditioned or legally authorized to use them. So when Keith Ellison says that, it's just another, I laugh. I mean, it's because it's another comedic statement from him. This guy is funniest when he's not trying to be.
How long have you been a cop, Joe?
23 years.
In your 23 years, when would you say that this job? Well, let me just ask: is the job still fun?
No.
Okay.
Now, it was like, there was for many years I thought I was, doing something meaningful and everything like that. But this is my opinion. And I want to stress that my opinion is not to speak for other police officers.
Correct. And
right?
we don't claim
it's
your
just
opinion.
From my standpoint.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
And you're entitled to that.
It doesn't reflect my employer's opinion or even my coworker's opinion. This is just my opinion. To me, no, it is not fun. But a lot of times policing is not supposed to be fun. It's just about this is your job. It is an ugly job. It's a violent job.
And I guess when I said, is it fun, the better word would have been, do you still enjoy it?
No, because this is really the only job, okay, where you could come to work and do your job and then have to worry about losing your job and then end up with criminal charges. I know of no other position, no other occupation in America that you have this. This is only police work. They send you in there specifically for this reason, to make arrests, to use force. And then when you do just that, this is exactly what your mission statement says in every law enforcement agency. And then when you do exactly that, your own bosses then want to use it against you because they don't know how to field a complaint. They don't know how to stand up. Not every boss. There are some excellent bosses out there. But the disturbing trend is more and more bosses apologize for police officers doing police work.
There's a narrative of systemic racism in law enforcement. A lot of these chiefs are kind of perpetuating and carrying on with this narrative, almost being apologetic. And one of the things that we've seen, and I'm gonna show a picture on the screen here for the viewers who are watching us on the OpsLens app, and for anybody who watches the show afterwards on YouTube. The picture that I'm showing right now, Joe, is of an officer in uniform, laying down on the pavement in full submission with his hands behind his back like he's being handcuffed, surrounded by a group of demonstrators from an organization like Black Lives Matter. This is him saying, you're right. There is injustice out here. There is systemic racism. You have been oppressed. The police are bad. I apologize for the police. And I was most impressed by your shock statement, which happens to be very true. And what do you say about this cop who's laying down here on the pavement like this?
Well, as I said on my own page, because I put that on my page and I created a nifty little meme for it too, but that if you will kneel or lay down so easily for a false narrative, then you can one day expect to be executed in that very position by the very criminals that you defend. We have lost, because of chiefs like this and cops, okay? And cops. Thousands of cops have kneeled over George Floyd. Yes. Thousands. Mm-hmm. Entire ages. I always say cops want to blame the media. They can't blame the media with this. They are responsible for their own bad press. The criminals no longer fear the police like they used to. The criminals have to fear the police. Command presence is the very basic, it's like one of the very first portions of the force matrix. Yeah. Command presence is very, very first thing. When you show up in uniform, do you look ready? Do you look ready to go? Do you look serious? Do you look like a guy who's going to make the arrest when you need to? Do you look like a guy, or do you look like the guy that's going to back down? Well, now you've given the impression to back down, because this kneeling and this laying, this pandering and this crying and this saluting the casket.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen several. You've seen cops actually cry over the death of George Floyd, haven't you?
Here, they've made videos. They're cowards. Okay, they're just cowards. It's just how it is, and they're responsible now for this false narrative being perpetuated. You have now made it so the criminals don't fear you at all.
It started with those. It started with these lip sync videos and these dance offs and these challenges and this hokey dokey BS that these departments are involved with. And you want to know why people don't have a healthy fear or respect for the police. And it's not people. It's not the everyday citizen that is supposed to be shitting in their pants every time they see a marked squad car, but the criminals are supposed to have that feeling when they see a cop coming. Are they not?
If normal law-abiding citizens fear the police, it's either a problem with them or it's a problem with their local department. Okay? Maybe the department's just, being overly aggressive in situations where they shouldn't be. Or it might just be them. Or it might just be a misunderstanding. But criminals, yes, we want them to fear the police. They did for a very long time. Now they don't. This kneeling and this crying and this saluting the gold-plated casket, this hasn't stopped any of this. This isn't pacifying anybody. It's caused the riots to increase. The riots have been going on for almost 2 months. because of this. Cops only have themselves to blame. When cops say, well, it's the media. No, it's not the media. You did this. You kneeled. You cried. You perpetuated this. You apologized. And for what? Listen, some cop in Tennessee has nothing to be sorry about for a cop up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
If Derek Chauvin is wrong, then that is what the trial is for. But otherwise, hey, man, it's a local police matter. It doesn't affect you in another state.
A 5-year-old.
What are you apologizing for?
A 5-year-old was just killed, execution style, in North Carolina. Cannon Hinnant was shot by
horrible.
I think what appears to be, at early reports, a neighbor, something or other. But this was certainly intended. I mean, the guy ran up on this 5-year-old boy who was outside playing with his big sisters and shot him in the head, and then ran away. You know, where is the riots and the kneeling for this child, and where are the 4 funerals with cops saluting his gold-plated casket?
As I've told other cops since that horrible incident to that child happened, is that you kneelers have not shown up here now, right?
Yeah.
You showed up for a guy who was a career criminal. George Floyd was a career criminal. This doesn't mean that Derek Chauvin was right or wrong. That, again, is what the trial is to. That's what the trial is to determine.
Right.
Right. But people have to understand that George Floyd got into this situation because of the illegal acts that he was committing up until his last day on earth.
Mm-hmm.
The police responded to a call and they reacted. They went from there. Something went wrong. Again, we'll find out in the trial. The problem here is I've seen more people, more cops, morally outraged over George Floyd than I have with this child and when other police officers have been ambushed and murdered. There was a police officer, was it California, who tried to break up a riot and was shot from behind. He's now paralyzed from the neck down. This was because of the George Floyd riots. I got to tell you, Stu, if I don't research his name, I won't know his name. You want to know why? Because nobody's putting it out there. And cops are not outraged by this, but they're outraged over the death of George Floyd, who contributed to his own death by being under the influence of very dangerous drugs.
And then you have the false narrative that Derek Chauvin is a racist cop. There's systemic racism at the Minneapolis Police Department. There's systemic racism amongst law enforcement across the country. Defund the police movements are going on, disband, dissolve, and now, like you said, ambushes. And how about things like this? Here is a Facebook post. Anti-police activists are planning to protest at Lieutenant Bob Kroll's home this Saturday. Kroll is the president of the Minneapolis Police Officers Federation. I just had him on the show here recently. 14 local groups are listed as part of the organizers of the event. They're demanding that Kroll is removed from the Minneapolis Police Department and that his wife is terminated from her position as an anchor at WCCO News. The group is meeting in St. Paul, and they plan to caravan to Kroll's home. In the event description, it states, quote, "No more violent police and no more biased media pushing pro-police narratives in Minneapolis," end quote. Joe, when is the last time, I mean, aren't you tired of these media people and these pro-police narratives? I'm overwhelmed with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the media is so slanted in favor of law enforcement that I'm actually ashamed to be in law enforcement now.
It feels uncomfortable.
I mean, it's just, when I read the Huffington Post, it's almost like, it's just like their adulation for law enforcement. It's nauseating.
It's like you're getting a BJ.
I'm beginning to wonder if it's genuine.
Right.
I will say to that I support Bob Kroll in whatever level of violence he has to use to defend his home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because as we've seen, because the protesters and the rioters are not being stopped by the police like they used to be.
No.
It all started with letting them block traffic. They are getting more bold. Now they are actually showing up at people's homes.
Right.
Okay, police officers' homes, standing outside with firearms. This is going to end in a very bloody situation. And if I had to put my money on who's going to end badly for it, it's not going to be. It's going to end very badly.
Right.
For the armed and untrained and undisciplined protesters. because people have an absolute right to use deadly force to protect themselves at their homes. If that's what Bob Kroll has to do, I fully support it. There are ways to protest Bob Kroll without resorting to terrorist tactics. Okay, there are ways to go about trying to get Bob Kroll removed from his position. They won't be successful, but they would be legal ways. When you show up outside the home shouting threats with guns, I don't care if it's an open carry state or not. Once you make the threats, once you put a guy's back against the wall, he is justified in using whatever force becomes necessary.
That's right.
I will not leave my home.
And I don't know what Bob's plans are.
Whatever they are, I respect them.
Yeah. But, certainly if, he's got more at stake here, too, other than himself. If he's married, if he's got kids around, he's got pets and animals. And I can only assume that if somebody's marching up on my house with a gun, that they're intending to use it and kill me with that gun.
And I'm going to respond accordingly because I have that right.
That's right.
Okay, because I've seen that it was coming this way for the past 5 years.
Something that you go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead, Joe.
Ever since Ferguson, we've been on this road.
Yes.
But we went well beyond the point of no return. And I hope I'm not taking over time. But, we are going well beyond the point of no return. We've gone well beyond the point of no return with George Floyd. Okay. Cops have shown that they're willing to actually kneel in front of the people that wish them harm. Why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in such a tactical disadvantage like that? Not even aside from the philosophical, tactical.
Well, because they feel so terrible about oppressing people. They're apologizing. They can't believe that for as long as they have. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're kneeling or laying down on the ground because you agree that there are these systemic racist or injustices that have been far too long perpetuated in the criminal justice field and in law enforcement specifically, why'd you go become a cop then? What are you apologizing for? You chose this profession. So why are you apologizing? Do you understand?
They've been conditioned.
Yeah.
They've been conditioned a lot of times by their chiefs. Like I said, some chiefs are great, but a lot are not. They've been conditioned. And I think a lot of it has to do with the hiring practices. They want to hire people who are not aggressive anymore. They want to hire people who are indecisive. You have to be indecisive, and whether people want to hear this or not, you have to be a confrontational person as a police officer. You are going into situations where deadly force might become necessary. You cannot have the indecisive guy going to that, or girl. You have to be decisive. You have to be willing to be aggressive. You have to be willing to respond with superior violence to overcome violence.
I'm looking at your Facebook page right now, which is how I met you, was on Facebook, and was immediately impressed with the way that you pontificate facts, and you just go in on some of these things. I saw that on here you have a portion of a screenshot of the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office autopsy report. It's as good a screenshot as you could take. But you put on here, if this is legitimate, it proves that George Floyd went into some form of cardiac or respiratory arrest in the hospital and could not be resuscitated. Going by the report, Floyd was alive for at least a half hour at the hospital. This means he did not die at the scene of the incident. And you know what that means for the case when Earl Gray cross-examines the state's medical experts. What does it mean?
Well, let me just say this. I will say that watching the Floyd video at first glance, those are not tactics that I would have used. But unlike Minneapolis Police Department officers, I was not trained in those specific tactics like they were, right? This does not mean that Derek Chauvin will be found not guilty. It doesn't mean that at all. However, they're represented by Earl Gray, he's a heavyweight.
Yeah.
He's going to be able to show that their narrative that he died choking on a patch of pavement is a house of cards built upon a foundation of sand.
Yes.
He's going to expose that. And it's then going to become a battle between the medical examiners. And Stu, I just want to say this. I know you probably have to go soon here. But
I got some time.
Asphyxia cases. Okay. Positional asphyxia cases are extremely hard for the prosecution to win. I am not aware, and I study as much as I can. I am not aware of a single case in which the prosecution got a conviction in a positional asphyxia case. It's almost always a civil action. Now, there might be people who've read more about it than I have, and maybe they can, maybe they could say, no, Joe, actually, this one there did result in conviction. But I'm telling you, I've seen worse than George Floyd, okay? You want to see something that's bloody and violent and doesn't look good for the police at all, research the Kelly Thomas case, okay, in Orange County, California, or I think it was city of Fullerton. Both those officers were found not guilty. And it comes down to the fact that you can't show how they die.
Right.
If somebody's got drugs in the system, did the drugs contribute to his death more than the physician did? Well, that then becomes the battle between the medical examiners. In the case of George Floyd, if there's no damage to his neck, and I read that there wasn't, there's some room for reasonable doubt here. I'm not saying that Derek Chauvin will be found not guilty. But what I am saying is, if he is found not guilty, don't be surprised. These cases are very difficult to win.
And when he's found not guilty, this country will burn once again.
Well, and that's, again, it comes back on the police. You have a basic responsibility to stop that from happening. And we've been failing to do that. By and large, Stu, we've been failing to do that for the past 5 or 6 years since Ferguson. Now, you won't see that happening down in Polk County, Florida with Grady Judd.
Right.
I can assure you that.
No, great.
When David Clark was in charge, right. When David Clark was in charge of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, he didn't tolerate that either.
That's right.
He stopped it right in its tracks. It won't happen in Pinellas County with Bob Galtieri.
Yeah.
Okay, because they draw on the line.
When Joe Arpaio was in charge down in Maricopa County, Arizona, and I heard he's going to – is he getting back involved? Have you heard that?
I thought he lost.
Okay. And that might be true. I haven't followed it because it's not my state. But, cops like that, that lead from the front is what you're saying. Not these pandering political bucklers that have completely weakened the platform of law enforcement and lost sight of what it means to be on the good side of history.
Right. When you work for a boss like that, you know where you stand. You don't want to cross them because they don't take any guff. But you also know that they got your back. Grady Judd will back his deputies to the hilt if they are right. Okay, he's done it. He's basically said, here will be the consequence if you come here to riot or invade homes.
Yeah.
He's told them, you're going to get shot.
You're going to pay with your life.
But a sheriff can make his own rules. He can basically make his own schedule. He can make, he doesn't have to answer to anybody. A lot of these chiefs, they have to answer to the people to put them in power. I've always said, look at the mayor, look at the council, the city council, or whatever form of government you have there, and then you'll see your chief. That will be a reflection of the government. And the government is a reflection of its constituents. But in saying that, when you take that job as chief that you might have to go and stand up. And if you're not doing that, then don't take the job. Okay, Bob Kroll could not be a chief because he will stand up, and they wouldn't want that.
That's right. And I was just going to bring that up. Actually, Bob Kroll just stood up to his chief on national media saying that Bob Kroll would be on the wrong side of history in this whole deal because he's not being forced to resign. He's not being forced to retire. And Bob is of full retirement age. If I know him well, and he has not said this to me, but I'm speculating, that the reason he's not gone is only because they're pressuring him to be gone. I think he would be gone. If everything was going smooth here, if Floyd had not overdosed and his heart blew up and died over there in Hennepin County, I think that, if this was status quo, everything is copacetic here, I think Bob Kroll's already retired at this point. But because of this and this pressure, I just think he's just the kind of guy that's saying, no, I'm not leaving.
Well, he probably has one more round left in him, and it's just because you want me to leave that I'm not going to leave. And that's probably what that is. And I've spoken to Bob on social media, briefly at times and everything like that. And I've watched his interviews. He is not a guy that backs down. There are some of these guys, some of these union bosses, they will sell out.
Yeah.
And I've seen it across the country, and it's sickening. But Bob Kroll is not sold out. That the guy down in Houston or wherever, Joe Grimaldi, he's pretty good too.
police union is there, and it's designed as the unions were first instilled to to protect good workers. That's why they're there. Bob is a cop's cop. He is leading from the front, always has, as a lieutenant with the Minneapolis Police Department. Bob is he's in the job for all of the right reasons. He knows who he's protecting, and that's why he had this job. In 30 seconds, what's your predictions? Conviction or no conviction on Chauvin?
Well, I mean this is a tough one, Stu. Because you know me, I've never been wrong when I predicted it, but I always wait till I have everything.
Okay, too early.
Right now, it's not a good case. Too early. It's too early. I'd have to watch more of the trial.
All right.
With Cat Steele, I was able to say from the start, yes, not guilty.
And I can have you back here, right? We're going to do this on Fridays. We're going to get casual. We're going to freestyle, right?
I would be honored to come back, Stu.
All right, awesome. Thanks a lot for being here. Joe is a currently working officer somewhere in America. Not going to tell you where. Going to protect his anonymity as much as he wants it protected. Until next Monday, thanks a lot for being here. My name is Stu. This is PC Radio.
Always told them they'd never amount to anything.
You know what? I am going to ground you for 3 months.
Yeah, they were right.
Why doesn't anybody ever live?
Stuart and Richard, PC Radio is on.